Imagine knowing exactly what your students are learning and exactly which steps you need to take next.
Join us in Down with the Reading Quiz to craft meaningful and productive formative assessments that move away from gotcha moments of basic recall and toward assessing what your students actually can do.
In this 30-minute free masterclass, we'll share 3 powerful assessment keys that work for any novel at any time of the year.
Head to shop.bravenewteaching.com/masterclass to sign up, and we'll also send you a free workbook to keep track of all your notes.
Once again, that's shop.bravenewteaching.com/masterclass to nail formative assessments forever.
Well, hello and welcome back to Brave New Teaching, and welcome to a little episode that we are calling Strategy Recall, where we are going to bring some strategies to you that we have definitely talked about before. In fact, this episode is going to be a rerun from way back in the podcast, episode 46, to think hexagonally, with our good friend Betsy Potash. She came on the early days of the podcast to talk about hexagonal thinking and activities to use hexagonal thinking to get students thinking creatively. And we thought that in this time where we are recording and we're doing a lot with books and bringing a lot of ideas to you and a lot of different things through Camp BNT this summer, we wanted to bring in some good strategies as well that basically can give all of these different texts and different ideas a place to go, if that makes any sense. We're also thinking a lot in the coming months about writing and writing instruction and writing instructional practices. So get ready for that to be coming your way very soon on the Brave New Teaching podcast. And so we wanted to kind of dip our toe into writing with this strategy. It's just so good. Sometimes getting students off the ground and thinking creatively and doing things can be hard because there's a delicate balance between enough scaffolding and too much scaffolding when it comes to student creativity. And so sometimes, like I'm generally, when I first create a lesson or I first create an activity, I'm either going to be way under scaffolded where students are just like flying out into space, or over scaffolded where I'm like micromanaging their minds and their creativity. And there's nothing wrong really with that. I just have to find the happy medium. And sometimes it differs from activity to activity. Sometimes it differs from student to student, like student group to student group. Some kids can do great and inspire each other and get going with something creative without a whole ton of scaffolding, and others need a little bit more. And hexagonal thinking, and the way that Betsy talks about it in this interview on the early days of the podcast, is just a really great way that both scaffolds enough and doesn't micromanage and isn't overbearing. And so as we're thinking about writing, especially creative writing, this is something that students need generally a lot more support. And then they need to be able to like fly free. So we wanted to bring this to you again to make sure that some of the ideas that you're getting from Camp BNT have a place to go. So like, let's bring in a true strategy for it. She's got a free download that she talks about in this episode, so make sure you head to the show notes for that one. But we are excited to bring this back to you and show Betsy a little bit of love because she is a good friend of the podcast as well, and just a brilliant educator and a wonderful human. So with no further ado, enjoy. Well, hello and welcome back to Brave New Teaching. Today we have a pretty cool interview. We have one of our favorite teachers who are friends from the internet, right? Who Amanda got to have the pleasure of sitting down with. And I'm so excited. She's going to introduce you to her in just a moment. Before she does, though, I want to remind you, if you've not already registered for the Shakespeare Teacher Festival, to please do so at your earliest convenience. The festival runs from April 5th through April 10th, 2021. It is completely free. We have some great resources that are available for additional purchase. We've got a lot of cool stuff for you guys there. If you go and register right now, we actually already have some things like a little welcome pack, introduction video, and a few resources that are already available right there for you. And the fun gets started, like I said, April 5th and goes through April 10th. And we're really excited about that. And Amanda is going to introduce our interview for today.
Well, hey, everyone. I am so lucky to have had the chance to talk with Betsy Potash. Betsy, you guys might know her from being around the interwebs, but Betsy, let's just start by saying, is good people.
She is the best people.
She is the best, people. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Like I know some of you guys are all probably in a similar transition phase in life where we don't have our high school buddies or our college buddies running around our dorms or our classes anymore. And I've found a lot of incredible friendship in the online teacher community. And I just feel incredibly lucky to have met Betsy. She is not only a brilliant English teacher and creative mind, but she is kind, she is inclusive, she is thoughtful, and she is a really hard worker. And I just admire all of that about her. Betsy has been an English teacher of, she'll tell you more in the episode, but she's taught everything. And she is now writing curriculum and doing kind of behind the scenes stuff for teachers, supporting teachers through curriculum work. And I just admire all of her accolades and the way that she's helped teachers. Betsy and I talked today about hexagonal thinking. I call it hexagonal thinking the entire time. Betsy very politely says it hexagonal. So I really apologize, Betsy, for not picking up on that, because I re-listened and I was like, were you not listening, Amanda? So hexagonal, for those of you who didn't know this, is how you pronounce it. And so Betsy has she has cornered this skill. Like, she has become an expert in this strategy, I should say. And so it's if you guys have seen it before, it's a bunch of hexagons are kind of spread out, and then kids start to put them together in different ways by writing something in the middle. So you might have, we're talking a lot about Shakespeare right now. So we might have, like murder written on a hexagon. And then I'm going to connect to that hexagon the murderers or the victims or the, whatever. I might have like a thematic word. I might have a character's name. All these different things that can work on hexagons. It is not an English only strategy. It's a thinking, brainstorming.
Yeah, it's a cool strategy. It's a mind mapping strategy. And I love it because it takes and Betsy's so good at explaining it, but it takes the I don't know, the big enigma, the rules are, there are no rules, to a mind map. And it creates something that's manageable and focused that helps a lot of our students be able to actually use it well.
And that's exactly what this episode is. We talk about how Betsy has seen teachers use it. I kind of brainstorm on the spot a couple of ways that I want to use it. So this episode is a deep dive into a single strategy. So if you're middle school, high school, any subject area, this episode is for you. This episode is so helpful. And of course, I'm going to redirect you guys in the show notes to free downloads of all of the things that Betsy has. She has a few paid options as well, but there are several free things that she's got to share with you on hexagonal thinking. So ladies and gentlemen, enjoy this show. Enjoy getting to know a little bit of the brilliant mind behind Spark Creativity, Betsy. Thank you so much again, Betsy. Big shout out to you. Big virtual hugs for dealing with our very relaxed interview style. We had so much fun talking. So again, you guys enjoy the episode. Be sure to connect with Betsy offline, right? Go find her on Instagram, find her in her enormous Facebook page, Creative High School Class or Creative High School Teaching. I'll link it in the show notes too. And go give her a high five and tell her that you heard about her strategy here on Brave New Teaching.
All right, let's cue the music.
You're listening to Brave New Teaching, a podcast for educators challenging the status quo. I'm Amanda, and I'm a high school English teacher in Illinois.
And I'm Marie, and I'm also a high school English teacher in Southern California. We're so glad you're here. Enjoy the show.
All right, everyone. I am here today with Betsy, and we are going to talk all about hexagonal thinking. Betsy, I would love for you just to say hi to everyone, tell them who you are and what you've been up to.
Hey, everybody. Well, I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm a blogger and podcaster over at Spark Creativity. And I spend my days cooking up creative methods for English teachers in the classroom. It is my passion. It is my joy. I never thought I would have a job I would love so much. So that's what I do.
How long have you been doing it, Betsy? How long have you been doing just exclusively teacher curriculum designing and writing, this kind of stuff?
Yeah, let's see, for 9 years since my son was born.
So you stayed home when he was born, and you've been able to rock it out doing all your podcasting and resource writing all that time. That's amazing.
Oh, thank you. I loved teaching. I loved it so much, and I missed it so much when I started staying home with my son. We lived in Southern California, and our childcare options were like more than I was making. And so I decided to try being at home and like sharing what I loved about teaching from there, and it turned out to be just so joyful for me.
And what were you teaching before you went the entrepreneurial route?
Oh, I've taught it all. I've taught ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th. I taught IB for a while when we were teaching in Bulgaria.
That's so cool. We talk a lot on the podcast. I know we're here to talk about some strategies, but we talk a lot about the teacher mom struggle. We talk about the, what do I do if I'm not teaching, or how do I deal with the guilt of leaving? And I mean, that's so real. So it's nice to hear someone else who's kind of gone through it. I know I deal with that a lot, especially this year.
Yeah.
I think a lot of teachers are in that position right now. So it's good to know we've got good company in Betsy. Everyone, guys, I really wanted Betsy to come on today to walk us through a very specific strategy that I think is going to transform so many of your classrooms. And it's called hexagonal thinking. And Betsy has become like the go-to expert in this area. She was actually on Jennifer Gonzalez's podcast, The Cult of Pedagogy, talking about this as well. And so if that says anything, I mean, you've hit podcast gold if you're there. So we're just dying to get a piece of hexagonal thinking. Can you set up for us, Betsy, like what it is and how, you might go about implementing it in the classroom?
Yeah, for sure. So hexagonal thinking comes from the business world. And in business, people would put all different kinds of concepts and ideas and brainstorms onto these little hexagons, just little cards. And then when you're looking at a whole spread of hexagons, you start moving them around and seeing, how could I connect this to that? Where are the most interesting connections, the most exciting and creative connections? And the kind of fun challenge of it is that each little card has 6 sides that can connect out. And so you get into this puzzling mode where you're like, oh, should I give the last side remaining on this hexagon to this idea, or should I save it for this idea? And that's where it becomes really exciting in the classroom. You get kids into small groups and you put a bunch of ideas onto little cards, right? And maybe you take characters from your book and you take the author's name and some things about style and some key quotations, but you also take concepts from history, related ideas, things that were happening in the world during the book. And you take concepts, things that are happening today in students' lives and in the country where they live. And you take things from other books and you take things from art. You can make the connections as wide or as narrow as you want. And then you set the kids loose with these hexagons and you ask them as a group to decide what connects where, how can they weave them together into a web. And the conversations that happen when they start trying to mix and match and move are really fascinating. And it's just like, it's this amazing process of coming to their final web. And there's no right answer, right? Which is one of the best things about it. But they're going to be working on it, and another group across the room is going to be working, and then they can all share and show and explain, why did they make these connections? They can explain them in writing, or they can present back to the class, or they can do it on a flip grid. And of course, there's a whole way to do this digitally, which we can talk about.
Well, let me start. Well, I definitely want to hear about the digital, and I know everyone else does too. I think I'm really curious about maybe some examples of how you've seen your teachers. I know Betsy runs an incredible Facebook group where it's always at the top of my feed. People are so asking amazing questions in there. But I guess maybe in there or other places you've seen teachers, are teachers using this as a discussion strategy, as a brainstorming, as a, like a pre-reading or a post-reading or a brainstorming for writing, or all of the above? I mean, where have you seen this strategy occurring within that realm of the classroom?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's super flexible. I just had a teacher the other day talking to me about how to use it for research and how to have kids be pulling the concepts of their research together that way. I think it works really well as a pre-writing, just to get all your thoughts down. If you want to have a solo hexagonal thinking activity where a kid can kind of outline their ideas and then start to put them together. And it's like it's like an outline in a more visual way for kids who are visual learners. But the predominant way I think people do it is to just discuss what's happening in a text and how it can connect out to the world and connect to what they're learning in history and art and science and whatever, because especially right now, especially online, discussion can be such a struggle. It can be so hard to get kids to turn their mics on, to turn their videos on. And if they're in a little breakout group and they have this kind of fun gimmick where they're moving these hexagons around, it unlocks their ability to talk to each other in a really lovely way.
I love when you talk about it like that. I think of this word that floats around that makes me crazy. The word gamification. Right? Yeah. Gamification makes me crazy because I'm like, I feel like everyone who uses that wants school to be a game. And I'm like, school's not a game. And I'm a fun teacher and I like to have fun with my kids, but the pressure to make everything leveled up or whatever is like so much pressure. But I feel like this is its own kind of thinking game and kids can see it as such. And like you said, unlock discussion. That's amazing. I think that would be wonderful to use. We've talked a lot about with some teachers about when you teach a really long text, if you're going to break it into chunks and having a hexagonal conversation at the end of each part, when there's kind of a bigger set of ideas to discuss and pull through. Like I can see Fahrenheit as a great example. That's a part 1, part 2, part 3 novel. That would be, can you imagine like how the conversation would evolve over that whole book?
Yeah. Yeah. And you could put all the visuals up on the wall along the way, or you could create like a Google Slides gallery where you snap photos of all the different ones and then walk through them at the end.
Okay. So how does this work digitally?
Okay, so I have designed a digital toolkit for this, which is free, which I'll send you that you can link because it makes it so much easier. But here's what you basically do. You give students a slide, and on the slide, there are a bunch of hexagons, and you can use the shapes tool in PowerPoint, slides to create little hexagons. And then you have a bank of words, and you just insert little text boxes, or you use mine in the kit. And then they are going to be moving the hexagons around the screen and sliding the text boxes onto the hexagon. So they'll put one in the middle, and then they'll put their first concept. Maybe it's the main character, and then they'll move one next to that, and they'll be debating like what's the next best connection? Should we connect that character to this character? Should we connect that character to this theme? If we connect it to this theme, then what do we put next? Is it the author next? Is it going to be this quote? Oh, I want it to be this quote. No, it's not that quote, right? They just like start debating. We have to put that quote over here next to this character. Well, then put those two characters together and put the quote in between or whatever. And they're conversing while they're sort of shifting them around on the screen. And you can let each student have their own, or you can have each group have their own and be moving them around. And then the really key thing is that you want to have a slide after that where each student can put in their written takeaways or record a short video that's explaining their connections. I like to put in little numbers and little arrows so they like label the connections within the web of hexagons and say, this is connection number 1. Now I'm going to explain in writing why we came to this conclusion, because maybe it's the intersection of 6 concepts, and it's like, wow, why is that connection so rich for your group? How did you come to that? And then they can write about it, and it leads to like really interesting writing, or they can record something on audio, or you can just get back together on Zoom and you can ask each group to check in and talk about what they've done.
I can see this taking a solid like several class periods to get through well in a good way, in a way that like I love those kinds of, we talk a lot about in our course curriculum rehab and on the podcast about essential question and inquiry based unit planning and having kids take the reins. And I think a lot of times teachers get nervous about that phrase, when you give kids a question and say the whole point of the unit is to discover an answer to the question, that feels like a very hands off teacher approach in a like a loose cannon kind of way. And I think what you're describing is, I can see the essential question kind of being the prompt for, the hexagonal discussion is like, here's our question here, and here are your hexagons. Let's get to the bottom of how we can look at this question. And not to mention, if we're going to say it's a couple days long, we then have, we talk about having template out weeks. So when you lesson plan, we really encourage teachers to think about their weeks as a template rather than a fresh lesson every single day. So like one thing I do is I like to have Tuesdays are always small group work, and Wednesdays or Tuesday, and then the Wednesday is going to be some kind of close reading. And so I think that's a really cool pairing, is like we have everyone here in a small group doing their hexagonal thinking. And then the next day we can close read something and see if the two things go together. So it can kind of fit into the layers of whatever you have in your classroom. I am dying to do this, and I have a research project coming up. So I think I'm going to go the research direction.
Cool.
I'm so excited because I've seen this around and I've never tried it.
Well, I love that idea for the weekly template. I feel like that takes so much pressure off in planning. You find what works well and you get in a rhythm, and that's so helpful for students too.
And that's right. So you change up the things within the template. So it's a group work day, but what we do as a group is different every week. But I know like for a planning purpose, like I am focused on making sure my kids are working in small groups for sure once a week, or whatever that might be. So I think this is the beautiful, beautiful option. Do you have a place, Betsy, where we can see some samples or, things other teachers have done?
Yes, I will send you a link to a We Are Teachers article that I put together that has 17 examples from different teachers.
That's pretty good. 17, that would do the trick.
Excellent. I can send you a reel too that just shows like a super quick, if teachers just have 10 seconds, they can watch the reel and see how hexagonal thinking comes together for all American boys.
What would you say the prep work really entails for at least the live, like in-person version? I mean, Are you cutting out all the hexagons for all the groups? I mean, what do we need to prepare for if we're going to be implementing this lesson?
That is such a good question. Okay, so I'm so into this, right? I'm total hexagonal thinking over the top. So I'm going to give you a bunch of options.
Ooh, okay, good.
You can print out hexagons and laminate them and make them dry erase. And then you can just have sets in your classroom, and you can actually let the students come up with the terms and jot them on in their groups. You can also just print sheets of blank hexagons and have the students come up with them. So that's like one really quick, easy way, especially as they become more experienced with it. Alternatively, you can type them into hexagons and print them out and give them to the groups and have them cut them out while they start talking. You do not need like a fancy hexagonal hole punch. If you have one, that's cool. Go ahead, use it. I know those are running around the internet. You can also, if you're doing it on Google Slides, obviously it's super easy. Another fun thing that I like to do with it is to make a hexagonal one-pager. I'm totally one-pager obsessed. So you can let students come up with key terms and ideas and characters and design a one-pager in the shape of a hexagon and then cut it out and then have their small group or the whole class be shifting those one-pager hexagons around on the wall and coming up with how they can connect. So you can kind of pick your level of complexity as you're preparing.
That leaves me with, okay, so one more question. And this is about, again, if you're saying complexity, have you seen teachers give out sets of hexagons that are not all blank, right? That there are some that the teacher has already decided on 1, 2, 3 concepts or quotes that must be wrestled with? Have you seen that? And how is that effective or useful?
Well, I love that idea, Amanda. I haven't seen it. You're innovating on the concept, and I love that.
On the spot.
Yeah, give them blank ones and then put a list up on the board and say, write these 6 down on your hexagons, and then you add the rest. What can you connect from your independent reading, from your elective classes, from your reading of the newspaper? What can you put together that's interesting to your group?
Be kind of cool to trip them up a little bit, like I think sometimes my kids are very savvy at kind of finding the easiest path forward. Very savvy at getting out of critical thinking. So I wonder if it might be kind of cool to, I can't think of a game show off the top of my head, but I feel like there are lots of game shows where you kind of do one thing, but then there's a challenge like Chopped, or, you name the reality show, all of a sudden, like, oh, the Great British Baking Challenge, right?
My favorite show.
Yes, I love the show. And you're baking your cake, you got this big plan, and then all of a sudden you have to use this crazy ingredient. And I'm thinking like that would be such a cool way to have kids not only thinking on their feet, but then it almost kind of tests their hypothesis of the connections they had in the first place. I mean, we don't need to give them something crazy off the wall, but something that's related to the conversation and where does that fit in?
Yeah. So are you saying maybe like partway through
Yeah.
their web making, you just toss in and say,
Yes.
now you need to connect it to, you know?
Yes.
I love
And
it.
it's like, and it's red. It's like the red hexagon of death or something like.
You could play like a siren.
Yes.
I love it.
Now it really is a game. I just need to let go of this idea that gamification is out to get me and just lean into it.
Gamification can be totally fun.
I think I can get there. All right, Betsy, where can we find you after this episode? I know everyone's going to want to run to go download, other than our show notes, which is where I'll link it all.
Aww.
Where can people find you on the internet to connect?
Well, if they're podcast listeners listening right now, they can find me at the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, and they can find me at www.nowsparkcreativity.com.
That is so amazing. And again, we will link Betsy's free download of her hexagons and anything else she sends me. I will put the reel, I'll put the We Are Teachers article, I'll get everything all listed and ready to go in our show notes. And we thank you guys for being with us today. Thank you, Betsy, for your brilliance. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it was so fun. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Thanks, Betsy.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much for listening. And thank you again to Betsy for coming on the show today. I'm going to have to be the one to interview her next time, Amanda, because I'm a little bit jealous, but that's okay.
I elbowed you out for that one.
We just wanted to remind you guys to head to our show notes, bravenewteaching.com, so you can get your hands on the downloads that Amanda and Betsy talked about today. If you haven't already registered for the Shakespeare Teacher Festival, take a second while you're there. Just click around and join us there as well. And we will see you guys next time. If you have a moment between now and then, to head over to iTunes and leave us a review and a little rating. It helps other teachers and educators find us and join the Brave New Teaching community. So until then, we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye, everyone.